The enormous silver ship descended slowly through Earth's atmosphere, its hull gleaming in the morning sunlight. Inside, Ambassador Keithrax of the Xandarian Confederacy stood perfectly still, 4 long fingers pressed together in the traditional pose of diplomatic readiness. The ambassador's pale blue skin contrasted with the dark, formal robes that marked a senior envoy of the Galactic Council. "We will be landing in 2 minutes, Ambassador," said Zariel, the youngest member of the delegation. "Are you prepared for the human welcome ceremony?" Keithrax's large, pupilless eyes blinked vertically. "I have studied their protocols extensively. I remain concerned about their unpredictable nature." Vexitra, the security specialist, nodded in agreement. "The briefing materials suggest humans are highly emotional and prone to irrational behavior. The historical records we reviewed showed constant warfare over illogical matters. Yet they achieved faster-than-light travel and survived their nuclear age," Keithrax noted. "There must be some order beneath the chaos. The Galactic Council would not consider their application otherwise." The ship touched down on the landing pad at the North American Diplomatic Center in Chicago. Through the viewports, Keithrax could see a small group of humans waiting. They stood in no particular formation, some talking among themselves, others checking devices in their hands. Such disorder would be unthinkable in a Xandarian receiving party. "Remember," Keithrax told the junior diplomats, "we are here to evaluate their suitability for full council membership. Our report will weigh heavily in the final decision." The main door hissed open and a ramp extended to the ground. Keithrax led the 3-member delegation down to meet the humans. A woman in a blue uniform stepped forward. "Ambassador Keithrax, welcome to Earth. I'm Commander Susan White, Director of the North American Diplomatic Center." Keithrax performed the traditional greeting gesture. "We appreciate your world's hospitality, Commander White." "This is Lieutenant John Miller," White said, gesturing to a tall man beside her. "He'll be your liaison during your stay." Lieutenant Miller stepped forward and smiled. The Xandarians had been briefed about this human facial expression, but seeing it in person was still unsettling. Why would a species evolve to display their teeth as a sign of welcome? "It's an honor to meet you, Ambassador," Miller said, extending his hand. Keithrax had prepared for this custom and carefully took the human's hand, noting with mild distaste the direct skin contact that Xandarians typically avoided. "Lieutenant, Miller has served on 3 first-contact missions and helped establish our embassy on Proxima Centauri B," Commander White explained. "He's one of our best cultural liaison officers." Miller's smile widened. "The commander exaggerates. I just have a knack for helping different species understand each other." Keithrax noted the lieutenant's odd mix of deference and familiarity with his superior. On Xandaria, such casual interaction between ranks would be considered highly inappropriate. After introductions, the humans led them to a sleek ground vehicle. Inside, Miller sat across from the 3 Xandarians. "Your visit schedule has official meetings in the mornings, but I've been instructed to show you authentic human culture in the afternoons and evenings," Miller explained. "Is there anything specific you'd like to experience during your week?" "On Earth?" Keithrax considered the question. "We wish to understand how humans function as a society despite your emotional natures. The council records show your species has nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yet you persist and even thrive. This is puzzling to us." Miller nodded. "That's a fair question. We're a complicated bunch. Sometimes our emotions get us into trouble, but they also help us solve problems in unexpected ways." Vextra's head tilted slightly. The briefing materials indicated humans often act against their own logical interests. "How does your society maintain function without clear hierarchical structures?" "We have hierarchies," Miller said, "but we also value individual choice and freedom. The tension between order and freedom creates a balance that works for us most of the time." The vehicle arrived at a tall building overlooking a large body of water. "This is Lake Michigan," Miller explained, as they entered the diplomatic quarters. "Your rooms are on the top floor, with views of the lake and the city." Keithrax gazed out the large windows at the sprawling human settlement. Buildings of different shapes and sizes stretched into the distance with no obvious organizational pattern. Vehicles moved in all directions along the roads. Humans walked alone or in small groups, some hurrying, others moving slowly. It all seemed chaotic compared to the precise planned cities of Xandaria. After the Xandarians settled into their quarters, Kithrax activated a secure communication device and contacted the Galactic Council. Initial observations confirm our concerns, the ambassador reported. Human society appears disordered and inefficient. Their liaison officer speaks to his commander with inappropriate familiarity. Their city planning lacks coherent design principles. Continue your evaluation, came the reply. Remember that appearance and reality may differ. The council requires comprehensive assessment. Later that evening, Miller returned to escort them to a formal dinner with Earth government officials. As they walked through the building, they passed a group of human children on a tour. The children laughed loudly, pointing at the aliens with excitement. Several broke away from their group and ran toward the Xandarians. Vextra stiffened, moving slightly in front of Kithrax in a protective stance. Cool! Are you really aliens? One small boy asked, staring up at Kithrax with wide eyes. Before Kithrax could respond, an adult human rushed over. Billy, Ryan, Madison, get back with the group right now. I'm so sorry, she said to Miller, and Duke, the Xandarians. Miller just laughed. No problem. Kids are curious everywhere, I guess. Kithrax watched the children reluctantly rejoin their group. On Xandaria, children would never behave so inappropriately in a government building. They would be instantly disciplined. Earth children can be a handful, Miller agreed, but their curiosity and energy are qualities we value. As they continued walking, Zariel spoke quietly to Kithrax. Ambassador, I noticed the human children displayed no fear of us despite our alien appearance. This suggests humans have unusual adaptability to new situations. Kithrax considered this. Perhaps. Or it indicates poor training and discipline. We shall continue to observe. At dinner, Kithrax noted with increasing concern how the humans interacted. They spoke out of turn, interrupted each other, laughed loudly, and frequently used expressions that made no literal sense. When one official told Miller he was pulling his leg regarding a policy matter, Kithrax was confused by the obvious anatomical impossibility. After the meal, back in the privacy of the Xandarian quarters, Vextra and Zariel gathered with Kithrax to discuss their observations. They are even more chaotic than the briefing materials suggested, Vextra stated. Their conversation patterns are completely unpredictable. Yet they have built impressive technology and established a functioning global society, Zariel pointed out. There must be some system we are failing to perceive. Kithrax stood by the window, watching the lights of the city shimmer against the dark water of the lake. Tomorrow, Lieutenant Miller will begin showing us what he calls authentic human culture. Perhaps then we will understand how a species so apparently irrational could have advanced to the point of council consideration. The ambassador's reflection showed in the glass, overlaid against the human city beyond. We must look deeper than surface appearances. The council requires a complete assessment and we shall provide one. The next morning, Lieutenant Miller arrived at the Xandarian quarters precisely at 8 o'clock. He wore casual clothes instead of his uniform, jeans, a button-up shirt, and a light jacket. Kithrax noted this change with disapproval. Today, we're going to see some real Chicago, Miller announced. First stop is the Art Institute. The Xandarians followed Miller to a waiting vehicle. As they drove through the city streets, Zariel pressed his face against the window, watching the humans going about their daily lives. So many different clothing styles, Zariel observed. How do humans identify social rank without standardized attire? Miller laughed. We have subtle cues, the quality of clothes, certain brands or styles, but mostly, we don't worry about it in everyday life. Inefficient, Vextra commented. Your species wastes mental resources interpreting unnecessary variations. They arrived at a large stone building with 2 bronze lion statues guarding the entrance. Inside the Art Institute, Miller led them through galleries filled with paintings and sculptures from throughout human history. Kithrax stopped in front of a large canvas covered in seemingly random splashes of color. What information does this convey? That's an abstract expressionist piece, Miller explained. The artist wanted to convey emotion rather than specific information. Emotion without information? Kithrax's vertical eyelids blinked rapidly in confusion. What purpose does that serve? Miller thought for a moment. It helps us process feelings that might be hard to put into words. Art isn't always about clear communication. Sometimes it's about experiencing something together. The Xandarians moved through the gallery, stopping occasionally to study paintings that particularly confused them. A group of human children on a school trip ran past, their teacher calling for them to slow down. Your young are permitted to run in a knowledge repository? Vextra asked, clearly disturbed. They're just excited, Miller said with a shrug. After the museum, Miller took them to lunch at an outdoor cafe. The Xandarians watched in silence as humans at nearby tables talked, laughed, and occasionally reached across to take food from each other's plates. Ambassador Kithrax, Zariel said quietly. I notice humans frequently touch each other's food and possessions without apparent negative consequences. Kithrax nodded. Their comfort with physical contact is remarkable, given their history of conflict. Miller ordered several dishes for them to try. When the food arrived, he explained, I got us a variety so you could sample different things. On Earth, sharing food is a way of building friendship. The Xandarians carefully sampled the human food. Their species could consume most Earth proteins and carbohydrates, though the flavors were unusual to them. This sauce contains unnecessary chemical compounds that serve no nutritional purpose, Vextra noted after tasting pasta with marinara sauce. That's called flavor, Miller said with a smile. We eat for enjoyment as much as for sustenance. After lunch, Miller took them to a baseball game at Wrigley Field. The Xandarians sat stiffly in their seats, surrounded by thousands of loud humans wearing matching colors and waving foam fingers. The Chicago Cubs versus the St. Louis Cardinals, Miller explained, one of baseball's oldest rivalries. When a Cubs player hit a home run, the crowd erupted in cheers. Kithrax flinched at the sudden noise. Next to him, a large human man jumped, up spilling some of his drink on Zariel's robe. Oh man, I'm sorry, the man said, offering a napkin. But did you see that hit? Incredible. Zariel carefully wiped his robe. You are excited by the trajectory of a small spherical object? The man laughed. First baseball game, huh? You gotta learn to relax and enjoy it. Throughout the game, Kithrax observed the humans around them. They seemed to shift between intense focus on the game and casual conversation with no apparent pattern. They consumed food and beverages continuously. They stood up and sat down without coordination. Yet somehow this mass of individuals functioned as a coherent group. After the game, Miller suggested they walk through a nearby park. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees as humans jogged, walked dogs, or sat reading on benches. Lieutenant Miller, Kithrax said, we have observed many human activities today, but I remain confused about your social structure. Who directs these humans on what activities to pursue? Miller looked surprised. Nobody directs them. People decide for themselves what to do with their free time. Without direction, how does your society prevent wasted resources and effort? Vextra asked. We believe people are generally happiest and most productive when they make their own choices, Miller explained. Sometimes it's messy, but it works. For us, they stopped at a small lake where people were feeding ducks. A child threw too much bread, causing the ducks to swarm aggressively. The child's parent quickly picked him up, laughing as they retreated from the birds. The parent shows no anger at the child's error, Zariel noted with surprise. Kids learn by making mistakes, Miller said. Getting mad wouldn't help anything. That evening, Miller took them to dinner at a formal restaurant overlooking the lake. As they ate, a server named Diane kept checking on their table. How's everything tasting, folks? She asked during one visit. The protein is adequately prepared, Kithrax replied. Diane laughed. I'll tell the chef you're absolutely raving about it. After she left, Miller smiled. That was a joke. She was being sarcastic because your response wasn't very enthusiastic. Deliberately, saying something untrue is humorous to humans? Kithrax asked. Sometimes yes, especially when both people know it's not meant literally. Fascinating, Zariel said, making notes on a small device. Humor appears to be a primary communication mode for humans. When Diane returned, Miller greeted her warmly. Diane, how long have you been torturing customers at this place? She rolled her eyes. Almost 5 years now, John. Someone's gotta keep you military types in line when you bring in the VIPs. Kithrak stiffened at what appeared to be an insult, but both humans were smiling. They're exchanging insults while displaying friendship signals, Vextra whispered. This contradicts all normal communication protocols. After dinner, as they returned to the diplomatic quarters, Kithrax remained silent, processing the day's observations. In the privacy of their rooms, the three Xandarians gathered to compare notes. Humans appear to thrive on disorder, Vextra stated. Their social interactions lack clear protocols. They speak incorrectly on purpose. They allow children to make errors without correction. Yet they created the art museum, the baseball stadium, the restaurant, all functioning systems with many participants, Zariel countered. Kithrax paced slowly around the room. Their approach is fundamentally different from ours. We achieve success through order, clarity, and purpose. Humans seem to embrace randomness and emotional response, yet somehow produce functioning societies. Perhaps, Zariel suggested, what appears as disorder to us contains patterns we cannot yet recognize. Kithrax moved to the communication device and prepared to send the day's report to the Galactic Council. After a moment's hesitation, the ambassador added a note. Request additional observation time. Human social dynamics more complex than initially assumed. Current hypothesis. Apparent chaos may mask sophisticated adaptive systems not immediately visible to Xandarian analysis. That night, as the city lights blinked below their windows, Kithrax wondered what other surprises these unpredictable humans might reveal in the days ahead. On the third day of the Xandarian visit, Lieutenant Miller met with Commander White in her office before picking up the aliens. He sat across from her desk, tapping his fingers nervously on his knee. They're struggling to understand us, Miller explained. Everything we do seems chaotic to them. Commander White nodded. The Galactic Council needs to see who we really are, not just our formal diplomatic face. Are they at least asking questions? Zariel is curious. Vexitra is suspicious. And Ambassador Kithrax, Miller paused. The ambassador is trying to understand, but I think our way of life challenges everything they believe about how societies should function. So what's your plan for today? White asked. Miller leaned forward. I want to show them something more personal. The museums and baseball game were good, but they were still observing from a distance. What did you have in mind? I'd like to introduce them to some regular people. Not officials or diplomats, just everyday humans in a relaxed setting. Commander, White raised an eyebrow. That sounds risky. I know, but they need to see how we interact when we're being ourselves. I was thinking of taking them to meet my friend Kate at the Navy Engineering Lab, and then maybe to O'Malley's later. The bar? White's eyes widened. You want to take 3 alien diplomats who think humans are erratic and dangerous to a bar frequented by off-duty military personnel? Miller winced. When you put it that way, it does sound like a bad idea. But Ambassador Kithrax specifically wants to understand how humans function as a society, despite our emotional nature. O'Malley's is the perfect place to demonstrate that. White thought for a moment. I should say no. But the Galactic Council needs to see the real us, warts and all. She sighed. Fine. But keep it calm. No incidents. The last thing we need is for the Xandarians to witness humans at their worst. Thank you, Commander. I'll make sure everything stays under control. Later that morning, Miller collected the 3 Xandarians from their quarters. Today we're going to visit a friend of mine who works at the engineering labs. Lieutenant Kate Williams is developing new propulsion systems for our ships. Zariel looked excited. We will see human technology development? This is most interesting. The lab was a large building near the lake. Inside, Lieutenant Kate Williams greeted them warmly. She was a short woman with curly red hair and grease-stained hands. Welcome to the Chaos Cave, she said with a laugh. Sorry about the mess. The lab was indeed messy. Tools and components covered workbenches. Diagrams and equations filled whiteboards. Several half-built devices sat in various stages of completion. Vextra's posture stiffened. This is a government research facility. It lacks proper organization protocols. Kate grinned. That's because we're actually getting work done instead of keeping things tidy for show. She led them to a central workbench where a complex device hummed softly. This is our new prototype. Still working out some bugs, but it's coming along. Kithrak studied the device. Your approach to engineering is highly irregular. On Xandaria, research proceeds through carefully planned stages with complete documentation at each phase. That sounds... Kate searched for a diplomatic word. Thorough. But we find that sometimes the best discoveries happen when we follow unexpected paths. She showed them around the lab, introducing other engineers who were working on various projects. Unlike the formal officials they had met previously, these humans were casual, passionate, and often interrupted each other to add ideas or disagree. During a demonstration of a small thruster, something went wrong. The device sputtered and then emitted a loud bang and a puff of smoke. The Xandarian stepped back in alarm, but Kate and her team rushed forward, arguing excitedly about what had happened. The fuel mixture was too rich, one engineer said. No, the containment field wasn't properly calibrated, argued another. Guys, the connection to the power source was loose. Look, Kate pointed to a disconnected wire. Kithrax watched with amazement as the humans rapidly disassembled the failed device, talking over each other, sometimes laughing at their mistakes, yet working together effectively despite the apparent disorder. After the lab visit, Miller suggested lunch at a small cafe across the street. As they ate, he asked the Xandarians about their impressions. The engineers worked without clear hierarchy, Kithrax observed. How did they know their assigned tasks? Miller thought about this. They all know the goal, to build a better propulsion system. But they each bring different skills and ideas. It's more of a collaboration than a top-down process. On Xandaria, such a project would have a detailed plan with each step predefined. Vextra said, Your approach seems inefficient. Maybe, Miller agreed. But it allows for creativity and unexpected solutions. Sometimes the best ideas come from mistakes or random connections. Zariel had been quiet, but now spoke up. Lieutenant Miller, I wish to understand more about humans in their natural social environment, not in work or formal settings, but where they gather for, what do you call it? Recreation? Miller smiled. You want to see how we have fun? Yes. To understand a species, one must observe all aspects of their behavior. Miller considered this request. He had already planned to take them to O'Malley's but wanted to prepare them first. There's a place I could take you tonight. It's called a bar, a social gathering place where humans go to relax, talk, and sometimes drink alcohol. Alcohol? Kithrax asked. The neurotoxin that impairs cognitive function? In small amounts, it helps some humans relax and be more sociable, Miller explained, though some do overindulge. You deliberately consume substances that reduce your already limited rationality. Vexitra looked genuinely shocked. Miller laughed. When you put it that way, it does sound crazy, but it's been part of human culture for thousands of years. That afternoon, Miller showed them more of the city, explaining the concept of bars and social recreation. As evening approached, he took them to a quiet restaurant for dinner, where he continued preparing them for the O'Malley's experience. The place we're going after dinner is called O'Malley's. It's owned by a former Navy officer named Patrick O'Malley. A lot of military personnel go there, along with dock workers and locals. Will it be loud? Vexitra asked with concern. Probably, Miller admitted. But that's part of the authentic experience. Humans often enjoy energetic social environments. Will there be danger? Kithrax asked. Miller hesitated. No real danger, no. Sometimes people get rowdy, especially after a few drinks. But it's all in good fun. Zariel looked excited. This sounds like an excellent opportunity to observe humans in an unstructured environment. As they finished dinner, Miller sent a quick message to O'Malley warning him that he was bringing special guests. The reply came back immediately. "No problem. I'll save you the corner booth. Should be a quiet night." Miller hoped that would be true as he led the Xandarians toward the bar. He wanted them to see humans socializing naturally, but Commander White's warning echoed in his mind. No incidents. The last thing Earth needed was for these important visitors to witness humans at their worst. "Ready to see how humans have fun?" he asked as they approached the neon sign that read, "O'Malley's Bar and Grill." "We are prepared to observe," Keithrax replied formally. Miller smiled and opened the door, leading them into the warm, noisy interior of the bar. He had no idea that this ordinary evening was about to completely change the Xandarians' understanding of humanity. O'Malley's was warm, loud, and filled with the smell of fried food and beer. The walls were covered with old photos, sports jerseys, and naval flags. Music played from speakers, while a television above the bar showed a basketball game. Most tables were already full of people talking, laughing, and drinking. When Miller walked in with the three blue-skinned aliens, the noise level dropped for a moment as people turned to look. Then a large man with a gray beard stepped out from behind the bar. "John Miller, about time you brought some interesting guests," he called out cheerfully. He walked over and extended his hand. "Patrick O'Malley at your service. Welcome to my humble establishment." Keithrax performed the formal Xandarian greeting, then carefully shook O'Malley's hand as they had practiced. "We appreciate your hospitality." "I saved you the corner booth as promised," O'Malley said, leading them to a table with a good view of the entire bar. "First round's on the house." After they were seated, Miller explained, "That means he's giving us free drinks as a welcome." "A business owner providing goods without payment?" Vextra seemed confused. "Is he not concerned with profit?" Miller smiled. "It's a gesture of friendship. Building relationships is sometimes more valuable than immediate profit." O'Malley returned. With drinks, beer for Miller and 3 glasses of water for the Xandarians who could not process alcohol. "Let me know if you need anything else," he said before returning to the bar. The aliens observed the room with intense interest. At the bar, a group of men and women in work clothes were playing darts. In another corner, several people in navy uniforms were engaged in a loud card game. The tables in between held various groups talking, eating, and drinking. So many different social groupings in one space, Zariel noted. Yet they operate independently without central coordination. "That's the beauty of places like this," Miller explained. "Everyone comes together but does their own thing." As the evening progressed, the bar grew more crowded and louder. A few curious patrons stopped by their table to welcome the aliens to Earth. Most were polite, though their questions showed limited understanding of galactic politics. Around 9 o'clock, the front door swung open, and a large group of men and women entered. They were laughing and talking loudly, wearing construction company logos on their jackets and hats. "Make way, people. Birthday celebration coming through," announced a tall, broad-shouldered man at the front of the group. "That's Roy Daniels," Miller told the Xandarians. "He runs a construction crew that's building the new transport hub." O'Malley greeted the newcomers warmly. "Roy, heard you turned 40 today, you old dog." "Don't remind me, Pat." Roy laughed. "Just keep the drinks coming and we'll forget all about it." The construction workers filled several tables near the dart area. The bar grew even louder as O'Malley brought out a cake with candles. Everyone in the bar joined in singing, "Happy Birthday," a concept Miller had to quickly explain to the bewildered aliens. "Humans celebrate the anniversary of their birth with communal singing and burned sugar products?" Keithrax asked. "It's tradition," Miller shrugged. "Most of our celebrations don't make logical sense, but they're fun." Near the bar, a woman with short blonde hair was dominating the dart game. She hit the center of the target 3 times in a row, causing her opponents to groan in mock despair. "That's Fiona Beck," Miller explained. "She works on the cargo ships. Best dart player in Chicago, or so she claims." As the construction crew settled in, the volume in the bar increased. Roy's voice carried across the room as he told stories and joked with his friends. Several of his crew members joined the dart game, challenging Fiona and her sailor friends. Kithrax watched with growing concern. The noise level is becoming extreme. How do humans communicate effectively in such conditions? We adapt, Miller said. You learn to focus on the voices you want to hear and tune out the rest. The atmosphere in the bar shifted subtly as the night went on. The sailors and construction workers began to exchange competitive remarks about their dart game. Fiona continued, to win, which seemed to frustrate some of the construction crew. Come on, Beck, give someone else a chance, called one worker. Not my fault you build better than you aim, Fiona replied with a grin. The comment drew laughs from the sailors and frowns from the construction workers. Miller noticed the changing mood and became slightly tense. Is something wrong? Zariel asked, noticing Miller's reaction. Probably nothing, Miller said. Just a bit of friendly competition between different work groups. Happens all the time. 1. Of the construction workers, a stocky man named Steve bumped into Fiona as he went to retrieve his darts. Her drink spilled down the front of her shirt. Hey, watch it, she snapped. Maybe you should make room when you see someone coming, Steve retorted. O'Malley appeared quickly. Everything okay over here? Fine, Pat, Fiona said, wiping her shirt. Some people just need lessons in bar etiquette, and some people need to get off their high horse, Steve muttered, returning to his friends. Kithrax leaned toward Miller. These humans appear to be entering a conflict state. Should we leave? It's just a little tension, Miller assured him. People blow off steam with words. It rarely goes further than that. But the mood continued to sour. Another sailor made a comment about the construction crew's latest project being behind schedule. Roy overheard and walked over to the dart area. You want to say that again to my face? He asked, his voice level but tense. The sailor stood his ground. Just repeating what everyone in town already knows. 3 months behind and counting. We hit unexpected bedrock, Roy explained, his face reddening. If the city's survey had been accurate, we wouldn't have the delay. Convenient excuse, the sailor replied. The two groups were now facing each other. The rest of the bar grew quieter as people sensed the brewing conflict. O'Malley moved closer, drying a glass but watching carefully. This is escalating, Vextra observed with alarm. Are violent exchanges imminent? Miller shifted uncomfortably. I hope not. But tensions between groups happen sometimes. Usually it just ends in words. Then the sailor said something that crossed a line. Maybe if you spent less time partying for your birthday and more time doing your job, the city wouldn't be wasting tax money on your incompetence. Roy's face darkened. Another construction worker stepped forward. And maybe your mother should have taught you some manners. Leave my mother out of this, the sailor warned. Why? She clearly failed at raising you right. The sailor lunged forward and shoved the construction worker hard in the chest. Roy stepped between them, but Steve, still angry about the spilled drink incident, used the moment to deliberately knock Fiona's new drink from her hand. Oops, guess I need lessons in etiquette, he said with a smirk. Fiona's response was immediate. She threw a punch that connected with Steve's jaw. The bar erupted into chaos as both groups collided in a flurry of fists and shouts. We need to leave now. Kithrax stood quickly, eyes wide with alarm. Wait, Miller said, moving them to a safer corner. Just watch for a moment. The Xandarians stared in horror as the humans engaged in what appeared to be primitive combat. Chairs were pushed aside, a table tipped over. O'Malley shouted for them to take it outside, but his words were lost in the noise. What happened next would change the Xandarians' understanding of humanity forever. The bar erupted into chaos as the sailors and construction workers collided. Fists flew, people shouted, and bodies pushed against each other in what looked like complete disorder. Kithrax, Vextra, and Zariel watched from their corner, horrified, yet unable to look away. This confirms our worst assessments, Kithrax said. Humans resort to physical violence when emotionally provoked. They are dangerous and unstable. Just keep watching, Miller urged. There's more happening here than you think. As the brawl continued, strange patterns began to emerge. when an elderly man who had been quietly drinking at the bar stood up. To leave, two fighters, one sailor and one construction worker who had been throwing punches at each other seconds before, paused their fight to create a path for him. They even steadied his arm as he walked past, then immediately resumed fighting once he was safely away. "Did you see that?" Miller asked. They protected a vulnerable member of the group. A woman at the bar shouted, "Watch the signed photo," as the fight moved toward a framed picture on the wall. Immediately, everyone in that area adjusted their positions, continuing to fight but now carefully avoiding the photograph. They preserve valued cultural artifacts even during conflict, Miller pointed out. O'Malley moved through the chaos with remarkable ease, no one striking him as he attempted to separate fighters. When a glass bottle fell from a shelf, 3 people, who had been actively fighting each other, all lunged to catch it before it could hit the floor and shatter. Zariel leaned forward, watching intently. There appeared to be rules to this disorder. Unspoken rules, Miller confirmed. No weapons, no hitting someone who's down. Protect bystanders. Don't break valuable things. They're not trying to seriously hurt each other. Vextra's eyes narrowed. But they are physically attacking each other. This is primitive violence. Is it? Miller asked. Look closer. A construction worker slipped and nearly fell onto the corner of a table. The sailor he had been fighting grabbed his arm, preventing the fall, then immediately threw another punch once the man was stable. They're protecting each other even while fighting, Zariel whispered, amazement in his voice. The front door of the bar opened and a woman in a police uniform entered. She was of average height with short brown hair and an expression of weary familiarity. "O'Malley!" she shouted in a voice that somehow cut through the noise. "Not again!" The fighting immediately began to slow. People separated, straightened their clothes, and looked slightly embarrassed. "Evening, Officer Newman," O'Malley called cheerfully. "Just a small disagreement among friends." "I can see that," she replied dryly. "Anyone hurt? Anyone want to press charges?" The sailors and construction workers looked at each other, then shook their heads. "Just a misunderstanding," Roy said, touching a small cut on his cheek. "Got a bit carried away celebrating my birthday." Officer Newman sighed. "I should shut you down for the night." "Aw, Lucy. It's all settled now," O'Malley protested. "Look, they're already making up." Sure enough, Fiona and Steve were talking quietly in the corner. She handed him a napkin for his bloody nose, and he nodded in apparent apology. Other sailors and construction workers were returning to their seats, some laughing, others slapping each other on the back. "Fine," Officer Newman said. "But I'm staying for a coffee, and if anything else happens, I'm calling for backup." As she moved to the bar, O'Malley quickly brought her a cup of coffee. The atmosphere in the bar had completely transformed. The two groups that had been fighting were now mingling, examining each other's injuries, and even buying rounds of drinks for one another. "I don't understand," Cathrak said to Miller. "They were attacking each other moments ago. Now they are engaging in friendly social bonding. This makes no logical sense." Miller smiled. The fight wasn't really about hatred. It was about releasing tension, testing boundaries. Once it was over, the underlying conflict was resolved. Roy was now sharing his birthday cake with the sailor who had insulted his work. Fiona was teaching Steve proper dart technique, both of them laughing. Zariel had been recording observations on his device throughout the entire event. Now he looked up with an expression of revelation. It's a social ritual, not true violence. A controlled release of emotional energy within a framework of understood limitations. Exactly, Miller nodded. If they really wanted to hurt each other, they could have, but that wasn't the point. Officer Newman walked over to their table, coffee in hand. "Lieutenant Miller, these must be our visitors from Xandaria. I'm Officer Lucy Newman. Sorry you had to witness one of O'Malley's famous conflict resolution sessions." "Conflict resolution?" Vextra repeated. "That was conflict creation." Officer Newman laughed. "Might look that way, but trust me, there's less real tension in the room now than there was an hour ago. Sometimes humans need to blow off steam. Better a few bruises between friends than letting resentment build up." After she returned to the bar, Roy Daniels approached their table. He had a small cut above his eye but was smiling broadly. "Hope we didn't scare you folks," he said to the Zendarians. "First time at O'Malley's can be an experience." "Your social group just engaged in physical combat," Cuthrax stated, "yet you appear undisturbed by this fact." Roy laughed. "Just letting off some steam. No hard feelings. Actually, turns out their lead engineer has some ideas that might help us with our bedrock problem. We're getting together tomorrow to look at the plans." He turned to Miller. "Pat says the first round for your friends is on me. Anything they want." After Roy left, Cuthrax, Vextra, and Zariel conferred quietly in their native language. Miller waited, hoping the evening hadn't completely ruined Earth's chances with the Galactic Council. Finally, Cuthrax turned to Miller. "We have made an important discovery about humans tonight." "Oh?" Miller tried to keep his voice casual. "Your species has developed a sophisticated social mechanism for managing conflict that superficially resembles chaos, but actually operates within strict unspoken parameters," Cuthrax said. "It is impressive," Zariel added excitedly. "The participants demonstrated remarkable awareness of their surroundings, protecting vulnerable members, preserving valued objects, and preventing serious injury, all while appearing to engage in unrestrained conflict." "Most fascinating," Vextra admitted reluctantly, "was the improved social cohesion following the physical confrontation. The two groups are now communicating more effectively than before." Miller relaxed slightly. "So you don't think we're just violent primitives?" Cuthrax's head tilted in the Zendarian equivalent of a thoughtful nod. "On Zendaria, all conflict is suppressed. Any disagreement must be resolved through formal protocols. Yet despite our supposedly superior approach, we still experience social division and resentment. Your species has found a different solution." Later that night, back at the diplomatic quarters, Cuthrax composed the report to the Galactic Council. The ambassador's fingers hesitated over the communication device, then typed, "After extensive observation, this delegation recommends Earth's immediate approval for full council membership. Humans have developed unique social adaptation mechanisms that allow for remarkable flexibility and resilience. What initially appears as emotional chaos actually masks sophisticated systems for conflict resolution, collaborative problem-solving, and community reinforcement. Their approach is different from ours but potentially valuable to the wider galactic community." Cuthrax paused, then added a personal note. "I believe we have much to learn from these humans. Their controlled embrace of apparent disorder has produced solutions we could not reach through our rigid pursuit of logic alone." 3 months later, Earth was formally welcomed into the Galactic Council, and when Ambassador Cuthrax returned to Earth for the ceremony, the ambassador's first request was to visit O'Malley's bar. Just to observe, of course.